So, hello everyone. My name is Lucy Larish. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Northern New England, Planned Parenthood Vermont Action Fund, and the President of the Vermont for Reproductive Liberty Ballot Committee. I'm here today in my capacity as President of the Vermont for Reproductive Liberty Amendment, despite what this slide says, so apologies for that. I didn't catch that when I was looking over these slides earlier. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you about abortion access in Vermont and the Reproductive Liberty Amendment effort specifically. Right now, there are no restrictions on safe legal abortion in Vermont. And in fact, that's been the way the policy reality in Vermont since the Roe decision was decided in 1973. In 2019, the legislature, Debbie Ingram in the Senate, had passed a law to guarantee, called the Freedom of Choice Act, that guaranteed all of the things that are in the Reproductive Liberty Amendment. So it includes the right to get pregnant and carry a pregnancy to term, the right to contraception, the right to choose it and to refuse it, the right to sterilization, the right to choose it and refuse it, and the right to an abortion. So that happened in 2019 rather quickly. And then at the same time, the Reproductive Liberty Amendment was happening simultaneously. So Roe, as you know, one day that is burned into my brain forever is June 24th, the day that the Dobbs decision landed that overturned the Roe decision, the decision that federally protected abortion rights since 1973. What that decision said basically was that states can only regulate abortion up after a certain point. There cannot be an undue burden, but that they determined that states could regulate abortion if they wanted to. They don't have to, but they could if they wanted to after a certain gestational age, after viability. So the Reproductive Liberty Amendment began also in 2019. The whole process of amending the Constitution began in 2019. And Debbie Ingram, Senator Ingram at that time, was in the Committee of Jurisdiction in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, where the language was created. And I think she can attest to the fact that the language went through many iterations and lots of due diligence. And I'd like to talk for a moment about what's in the Reproductive Liberty Amendment. So it's a proposed amendment, and it would protect every Vermonter's right to make their own reproductive decisions, including whether and when to become pregnant, use temporary or permanent birth control, or seek abortion care, as I mentioned earlier. And here is the exact language of the amendment. And I just want to take a minute to pause on this slide and unpack the language a little bit, because there are a lot of questions about this. So Article 22, personal reproductive autonomy. This is quite beautiful, elegant, one sentence that means a lot. That an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is central to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course, and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. That's really two parts. The first part is about a person's personal reproductive autonomy. That has been defined through decades and decades of U.S. Supreme Court law and lower court law to mean very specifically this basket of rights that I just mentioned: the right to get pregnant, carry pregnancy to term, choose or refuse permanent or temporary birth control, or seek abortion care. So personal reproductive autonomy has been very well defined in the courts. There should be no question if the state challenges this constitutional right in the courts with a law that restricts personal reproductive autonomy, it should be very clear to the courts what this means. And the second part of this, and I should just add, there's also the legislative record and legislative intent language. So even if they, for whatever reason, need more clarification about what the legislature intended or what the language means. There's lots of legislative record as well as press accounts documenting exactly what the amendment was intended to do. And then the last part, unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means, is the absolute highest, best judicial standard of review and protection that we have for any law within our country. So what this does is it sends the signal to the courts that this is a fundamental right, and this should be treated very carefully, and that it can only be amended or restricted if the state comes up with a really compelling interest and the courts agree that there's a really compelling interest from the state. And if the courts agree, then the remedy for that interest has to be so narrowly tailored as to only address that interest and not to bleed into any of the other rights that are covered in the amendment. So I just think maybe I should pause there because in case there are any questions about the language, sometimes there are when I go through this. And I can't see the chat, so anyone can just jump in if you have a question or tell me to keep going.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, I'm sorry to say.
That's okay, I wouldn't be able to see it anyway.
True. So can you give us an example of something that might meet that last part?
Rise to the level of a compelling state interest. Yes, absolutely, I can. One that I think everyone can relate to is freedom of speech. We all really, freedom of speech is really important in this country, and we value it very, very highly. At the same time, the courts have decided on a couple of different occasions that there are instances where they feel there is a compelling interest to restrict speech. And one example where there was a case where someone shouted fire in a really crowded movie theater and there were tramplings and people died. Like, it was a horrible, horrible thing. There was no fire. Someone just thought it might be fun to shout fire in a crowded theater. So the courts, their charges were pressed, and the courts decided that, individuals don't have the right to shout fire in a crowded movie theater or a crowded place where people's life, health, and safety is at risk. Another example, also about the right to free speech, is the courts have also decided that there is a compelling interest to limit speech for hate speech, certain hate speech. So that's an example of the strict scrutiny standard in action. So in both of those cases, they said, okay, there are instances where free speech should be restricted, but you still have free speech. Like, overall, free speech is out there. We all have it. We all still have it. We all enjoy it. But there are these rare instances where there's a compelling interest for the state to restrict it a bit, just to make sure that we are adhering to our values as a culture for life and safety, and and not promulgating hate. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And just jump in if you have questions. It's a small group, I think that would be fine if anyone else has any questions about the language. I'll move on then. So Vermont was the first state in the country to begin this process and to even conceive of doing a constitutional amendment. It began in 2019, and I can tell you my story. I'm sure Debbie has her story about how she got involved in this, and others have. There are many stories of how a lot of people, how they got involved in this effort. But I was in a crowded conference room in Chicago with a whole bunch of people from Planned Parenthood Federation's policy experts from across the nation. We were all gathered together in Chicago for a conference to talk about the future of reproductive health policy. And we all got the word at the same time that Justice Kennedy was retiring from his seat from the US Supreme Court. And we all knew at that moment that Roe was going to fall. And it was no longer a matter of if, but a matter of when. So I made the commitment in that moment to come back to Vermont and do everything that I could to protect reproductive rights in Vermont law, as well as in the state constitution. And I began that process simultaneously, pulling together legislative leaders and advocacy partners, the Vermont Medical Society, Vermont ACLU, the speaker, the pro tem, chairs of committees of jurisdiction, and others to get to work. We worked on language. The language was vetted and reviewed by legal scholars at UVM, constitutional scholars in state, as well as nationally, as well as the ACLU shop nationally, in state, the Attorney General's office, and Planned Parenthood Federation policy and constitutional law experts. So we had a lot of expert eyes on the language, and it went through lots of iterations until we finally landed on that language that we just saw a few minutes ago.
Yeah, actually, Lucy, if you wouldn't mind my interjecting, just
Please do.
thank you for mentioning me. I appreciate it. Yeah, I did want to give a shout out actually to Senator Jenny Lyons, who was the chair of Senate Health and Welfare at the time. And people may not realize that amendments to the Vermont Constitution have to start in the Senate. And I think Jenny was, I think you persuaded her to be one of the people to introduce the amendment, and you did a wonderful job, you and your staff, at making sure that we were educated. But I remember Senator Lyons saying that she was absolutely certain, as you just said, that it was just a matter of when, not if, Roe v. Wade would be overturned. And so there was a lot of energy in the Senate to make sure that that this got enshrined not only in statute, as you pointed out, we passed a law immediately, but then to actually put it in our Constitution. And so real shout out to all of my colleagues in the Senate for taking swift action. And you're right, we heard from so many different people and so many different opinions and different angles, and got lots of legal advice and really did a lot of due diligence around this. So this is something that Vermont can be proud of, that we're the first state to have taken this kind of action. So thank you for your leadership.
Yeah, thank you. And really well said. I mean, everyone in that Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate were true leaders. And in this, it was a huge effort. And Senator Lyons, her leadership was incredible. She was so dug in and focused on the details and making sure we got the language exactly right. I mean, everyone was, but as the leader of the committee, she really made sure that happened. So yeah, that was a beautiful process to watch unfold and to be a part of. So our national office has named this effort, this amendment, to be a must-win for the reproductive rights movement nationally. Just to give you an idea, I mean, that doesn't happen very often. We're one of three. We're like of the top three of ballot initiatives in the country that the national office is saying is must win for the movement.
Lucy, may I just interject a question? There is a question in the chat box.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Please do.
there's a question in the chat box from Sally, and I had the same question about whether any other state is doing anything along the lines of what Vermont is trying to do.
Yeah, we would be among the first in the nation to do this. We're the first state to ever even begin the process. We're the first state to qualify for the ballot. But in the last few months since Roe fell, the state of Michigan collected the requisite number of signatures to put it on their ballot. They only have a 1-year process to amend their constitution. In Michigan, we have 4 years. So we may have company on election night. There may be 2 states in the nation to put abortion rights in their constitution. Although I will say, I think ours is better. It includes birth control. It includes, it doesn't have the kind of restrictions that the Michigan language does. Michigan's language is very complex. Like there's a lot of text. So anyway, I think our language is way better. If I do say so myself. But yeah, and California may also have this on the ballot too. Although there's not a lot of talk about California right now. I wonder if something happened, but I need to just like catch up and like raise my head above Vermont for a minute and just see what's going on in California now. But there could, at the last I knew, there could be 3 states on election night who could have abortion rights in the Constitution explicitly. We'd be the first 3 in the country.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And here's some key guiding assumptions for the RLA campaign. And, we do research. We did polling. We wanted to know, where do people stand in Vermont? Or do we have a chance of winning? So we did a couple of polls and to test the RLA ballot measure language. And it had we showed an average yes vote allocation of 70%. And that's without any pro or con messaging mixed in. That's straight up just the ballot measure language before they hear any opposition or proponent messaging. That's significant because that's a big number. There are very, very few things in public life that have that high of an approval rating. But when people are exposed to the amendment language after hearing opposition messaging only, we lose about almost 30 points. It falls very quickly, but when there's a mix of messaging, of pro and con messaging, we're still up about 9 points in our polls. So the bottom line to that is that we're in a really strong position to going into the election, assuming we can get our message out there. That is the critical piece here. We have to make sure that voters hear our message. So that's why your work in the UU, doing, letters to the editors and op-eds and doing this, sharing, taping this and sharing it with people, it is critically important that our message gets out. Our data team projects that there are about 150,000 Vermonters who voted in the last 2 elections that are very strong reproductive rights supporters. That's significant because in the last midterm elections, there were less than 300,000 people who voted. So, if we can just activate that base of 150,000 people to all vote and hopefully gather more votes as well, we're in a very strong position to win, we believe. But we also have concerns, and they are, this is the list. Significant out-of-state opposition funds. We know Vermont has, fairly small population, 640 or so thousand people, very rural. We only have one media market. Our media markets are very small, but there's one media market that covers almost the entire state. It would take very little on a national scale compared to other states' efforts. This campaign would cost not that much money for our opposition to derail and to really mess with. So our fundraising is important. We want to make sure that we are being proactive and that we're able to survive opposition attacks. We're also seeing some negative campaigning and misinformation about the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, especially coming from, trusted messengers like the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, of course, has a position, an anti-abortion position, but at the same time, we know that Catholics, more than 50% of Catholics actually do support safe legal abortion. I think I can't remember if it's 52%, 56%, but more than 50% of Catholics believe abortion should be safe and legal, according to the national organization Catholics for Choice, that's done quite a bit of research on this. The unfortunate part is that the Catholic Church is simply repeating the misinformation that's coming from Vermont Right to Life and Vermonters for Good Government, the organization that was created to oppose the amendment. And that that messaging, that information is either incredibly misleading or downright false. So that's problematic. We also have a situation where voters in Vermont have a lack of familiarity with ballot measures and constitutional amendments. We don't do this very often in Vermont. I think the last constitutional amendment that was on our ballot was back in 2010 or 2011, no, something like that, where minors who were not of age, who would not be of age by the time, who were not of age by the time of the primary, but would be of voting age by the time of the general election to be able to vote in the primary. So there was no campaign, there was no money spent, there was no real advocacy about that. It passed easily, it was not controversial, and we just moved on. So this is the first consequential constitutional amendment in my lifetime that I am aware of that we've seen in Vermont. And so it's part of our education campaign is to make sure that people know that the constitutional amendment is going to be on the ballot and what that all means and how that all works. I think, we have had a sleepy base. I think I wouldn't say that anymore since June 24th. I should probably take that out of the slide. Yeah, I think we were struggling for the first few years. A lot of people were like, oh, Roe's not going to fall. People like Debbie and me and Jenny Lyons and others in the legislature, we knew Roe was falling, but a lot of people were like, nah, that's not going to happen. Weren't really paying as much attention and didn't feel like that would happen. But it did. And here we are. So our sleepy base, I think, has woken up. And this is also a proactive ballot measure. And, we all know that abortion is safe and legal right now. And so maybe a lot of people don't feel a sense of urgency and like, oh, maybe again, some complacency, like, well, maybe we don't have to worry in Vermont. I think we're fine. We have a law, we're good. But what people don't realize is that we're in any given moment in time, we're only 2 years away from potentially a new legislature coming in and passing really horrible Texas style laws, bans, criminalizing cruel laws around abortion rights or reproductive rights. So that's why a proactive ballot measure makes sense for Vermont so that we can protect from future legislatures. I mean, for some people think, oh, that's not going to happen. Vermont's good. Like we have a progressive legislature. They wouldn't do that. Well, this legislature wouldn't do that, but that doesn't mean a legislature in the future wouldn't do that. And I would just compare to President Trump. I think many people would not have ever imagined in a million years that we would have someone like Trump as our president. He got 3 appointees to the U.S. Supreme Court. He's the whole reason Roe fell. So we can't, what I learned from that is that we can't take anything for granted. Bad things can happen, and we need to do everything we can to be proactive and protect ourselves long term. So this is the one that has me, this is the one I'm most nervous about, for obvious reasons. That a big slug of out-of-state money could do a lot of damage here. And just, regarding the national impact of this, I mentioned earlier that the national office has dubbed this a must-win for the movement. We know that Learnings for Vermont will help other states do the same. And we're collecting data, research, messaging. We have planning documents and this whole infrastructure that we're building in this campaign that can provide a roadmap for other states to follow. We've been working on this for 4 years. So we have a lot of infrastructure built and a lot of information that we can export and customize to other states to help them. And the other part here in why Vermont is so important is because we can deliver a big win with a bigger than a 51% margin. Like we have the opportunity, we have the potential to win, win with in the 60th percentile kind of range. That's pretty big. And I think that will send a really strong message. And that's a case of high water floats many boats. And that's a really great message to send to other states, and that will really give momentum to the movement nationally. And this is the budget overview. People want to know how much this is all costing. It's kind of an eye-popping number for Vermont. It seems crazy high, like a crazy amount of money, but this is what we feel we need is a $1.7 billion budget. Part of that is because candidates receive a preferential rate, a discounted rate for paid media, and issues don't get that same discount. Like we're competing, like we're in the same sort of market with, like, you know, the Ford dealership or whatever, whoever else is advertising. So we have raised about, almost 1.5 million so far. So our gap, actually, it's reduced. I'm happy to say that I just got a couple of gifts, and our new gap is now $170,000 in the total budget. And here's some ways that you can support. You can pledge to vote yes on the amendment. You can donate. And I can give you our web address, it's right there, reprolibertyvt.org. And there you can sign up to take the pledge to vote yes. I hope you all will do that. And you can sign up to volunteer. If you sign up to take the pledge, you'll get on our list and you'll get communications about volunteer activities and about, just about the updates about the campaign in general. And so you'll be able to stay in the loop. And yeah, that's really what I have for you today. And that's my contact information. Actually, that's the C3, or never mind. That's the C3 contact information. I can give you my C4 information. So that's what I have. I'm going to stop sharing. So maybe we can have a conversation if you have questions or would like to discuss this at all.
Lucy,
Hi.
winners in Greensboro,
Oh,
to
hi.
about misinformation and Vermonters for Good Government. I attended one of their sessions last night at St. Norbert's Catholic Church in Hardwick, where Ann Donahue was the speaker. Just very polite, very calm, very level-headed, very insensitive to the plight of real women and living in a real world. At some points, just devastatingly crass in some of the comparisons she made. But she was very, very focused, like as if the whole purpose of the Reproductive Liberty Amendment was in order to allow for late-term abortions. That was almost her whole presentation, virtually focused on late-term abortions, which, and the one thing she never said was, my experience has been, if somebody's having a late-term abortion, it's because the person carrying the baby, a life is in danger, or if the pregnancy is not ended, there's going to be a funeral for that baby almost immediately after the birth. And those are the kind of situations I've been confronted with when late-term abortion was an issue. I just want to say, I want to give props to one of your organizers, Sade Bolter, who, man, he's like, I've got like 5 pages of
our talking points.
And he did a great job trying to prep an old guy, but I just want, you're right about the misinformation, and they do it shamelessly, and they just, I'm not saying they're lying, but boy, they're sure telling a pretty lopsided story, Yeah. And I don't know what you do about that, but I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks so much for those comments, and thanks for going to St. Norbert's and enduring that. That must have been difficult. You're absolutely right. late-term abortion, first of all, is a fabrication. There is actually no such thing as a late-term abortion. There are no third trimester abortions that happen in Vermont, elective third-term abortions that happen in Vermont. So though any pregnancies that are ended in the third trimester in Vermont are because of the very reasons that you were mentioning. There are serious fatal fetal anomalies, or the life of the mother or the pregnant person is in danger or at risk. So yeah, abortion saves lives. And it is very important for people to understand that. And yes, our opposition is saying some pretty outrageous things that, I think I'm really hoping that most Vermonters can just see through that and understand that, look, this doesn't happen, and this doesn't pass the straight face test. This is a bold-faced, sensationalist scare tactic from people who just want to see abortion banned, period, for any reason at any time in a pregnancy. These are not people who are being reasonable about wanting to allow for reproductive autonomy and ensure reproductive autonomy for people. That's not what it's about. It's a veiled agenda.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I see there's a lot of stuff in the chat here. I just want to catch myself up. Are there any other questions that I haven't? Karen says this history brings tears of thankfulness to my eyes. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, and Sandy got an opposition postcard in the mail the other day. Yeah, was it the one with the fetuses on it? Such a turnoff. Some of my friends are very aware of abortion issues, but were surprised at the movement against birth control. Yes, yes. These same folks would never admit it, but they are actually, our opponents are actually against birth control as well. So when I say they have a veiled agenda, that's another example of what I'm talking about. So thank you for lifting that and bringing that up. You're absolutely right. And then there's a question about Senator Lindsey Graham's bill and, where the supremacy, who wins if Congress passes a law that bans abortion nationwide. So we can unpack that for a second. One issue is the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution that says federal law preempts state law, but we also have a standard in federal law that says that federal laws are the floor, are the baseline, and you can't take away rights that are available that are granted on the federal level. However, if states want to grant additional rights beyond that they can. So those are two conflicting philosophies or legal standards. So it will be interesting to see. It would really depend on the actual language of the bill. That said, we know that even if Lindsey Graham was able to muster up enough votes to pass this year, it would never pass because President Biden would veto it in his tenure. There's no way that President Biden would let that become law. So we're safe at least for a little while there. And then we also have these kinds of laws would also have to be, if it was determined that it was illegal nationwide, then attorney general's offices would have to be the enforcers. And attorney general's offices, I think, would very likely gather together with a form of civil disobedience at the state level, similar to what they did with immigration laws, where they said, we're not enforcing that. We're not enforcing that terrible immigration rule of President Trump. Sorry, no. So I think a similar thing might happen as well with that. But regardless, I mean, this is an unknown, you're right. This is an unknown place right now, and untested. Nonetheless, the single most protective thing that we can do in the state of Vermont to protect reproductive rights, all of our reproductive rights, is to pass this constitutional amendment. It gives us more power to fight back against the feds if they want to if they want to monkey with this law. And I see, Tracy, you've had your hand up for a while. Apologies, I didn't get back.
I have. I was the one who had posed that question as well. So I'll just tag team on that. My name is Tracy Wright, and I'm from Jericho, and I'm actually serving as the Green Mountain District of the United Methodist Church lay leader, though I attend a federated church. So thank you for allowing me to be here with my UCC brethren. You know, I'm just gonna, I was raised in the South, and I have a brother-in-law who says what he who is, my brother-in-law is Republican, and he sees the Supreme Court's role right now to be about controlling women. And he sees that played out in his churches. He sees that, and you know, one of the things I think, and I know I'm sort of speaking to the choir in many ways here, but I think one of the things we need to be really aware of is how our faith impacts this, and how we talk about how our faith impacts this, right? When our first known named woman in the Bible has somehow, you know, brought sin into the world, you know, that sets us up for needing control. And I think in the ways in which we preach in our churches, and the ways in which we talk about our faith, our God as a gendered, as a, you know, always male, it matters. It really does. And, you know, so I guess I'm tagging here the sort of faith component, but I think one of the things we can really do is challenge in ways that we can, as preachers, as, you know, ministers within our churches, as, you know, lay folks, and I mean that for all of us, if we are in a faith community of any sort, to challenge that preconceived notion of God as male controlling women, and allowing all of us to see that differently. So I'll sort of end it with that. You know, my other question about my other question for you, Lucy, actually has to do with let's get knowledgeable about how one goes about having abortions in our state, right? You know, you made the comment that there are no third trimester abortions in our state unless it is a risk for someone in that process, because as Ed attested to, we get bombarded with misinformation, right? And, you know, the signs are, you know, vote no for late term abortions, right? And I think for some people, just the adding the name of Planned Parenthood has such a negative reaction to it that folks shut down the ability to take in quality information. So I think if we can say of ourselves, this is what the abortion landscape looks like within our state, and like not necessarily, you know, be talking about Planned Parenthood, that keeps those avenues open for the potential of having information being consumed. You know, it's like a trigger word, right? Planned Parenthood is a trigger word for some people. As soon as you say that, they, you know, they come up with all sorts of wonderful old videos and whatnot, right? But I think it really behooves us to educate ourselves on what that looks like in our state. And, you know, I think Planned Parenthood does a great job of communicating some of that. But Lucy, can you talk about Planned Parenthood as an abortion provider, but then also our medical facilities that is an abortion provider, and, you know, sort of holding those two things together? Because it is part of our landscape, but Planned Parenthood is not the only landscape for abortion providers in our state. And just speak to the reality of of how one goes about getting an abortion in our state. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Oh, I can speak with most, you know, I have most information, of course, about getting an abortion at Planned Parenthood, but of course there are other places that perform abortions. There are OBGYN, private practices, and hospitals that perform the procedure. And at Planned Parenthood, well, first of all, I will just say that our abortion, people who refer, patients who are coming to us asking for abortion or moving in that direction, it's a pretty small number, 4 to 5% of our patients. Nonetheless, we feel like it's really important healthcare, and that we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to not stigmatize abortion care. So that's why we are loud and proud about sticking up for our patients who want abortions. We don't think that any patient should be shamed for getting the care that they need when they need it. So if a patient comes to us wanting an abortion, first they would get, well, we would take a pregnancy test to confirm that they're indeed pregnant. And then they would go through counseling where they would understand, they would get to know what their options were. And abortion, one of the options, the other is to carry the pregnancy to term and either become a parent or to adopt. And those, we make sure that every patient has that, those conversations, and we make sure that everyone has the time and space they need to make the decision that's best for them. We encourage them to bring family and loved ones, into the conversation as they feel they would like to, as they feel comfortable, and make sure that they are taking the time they need to make the best decision for themselves. If they decide they want to pursue the option of abortion, then we make an appointment. And depending on their gestational age, if it's before, I can't remember now how late abortion, medication abortion is provided, I think, oh boy. In the early gestational ages, you can have a medication abortion. It's a series of 2 pills where the contents of the uterus are sloughed off, much like happens when a person has their period. So there's that kind of abortion. Those are by far the most common abortion procedures that we do at Planned Parenthood are those early first trimester or maybe up to 12 weeks of abortion. And then after that, in the second trimester, then we would move into, there's probably an aspiration abortion, and that would be an inpatient procedure. And then for some people who have, there are those rare instances where you have a person who is in the 3rd trimester or late in their term of their abortion and have a tragic circumstance, as we were talking about earlier. And just this whole, I just think, I just want to call out that I just think it is incredibly cruel, and it is just incredibly cruel to the people who have had to suffer the trauma of a loss, of a pregnancy loss, to be talking about, throwing terms around like late term abortion and abortion up until birth, as our opponents are doing. It is, it's incredibly stigmatizing and painful for patients who have endured this. And I have had the honor and privilege of hearing the stories of some patients who have had to endure the pain of that and suffering of that. And for their sake, I just want to say that, that is, I just think it is the most toxic, hateful thing that you could do to somebody. I mean, it's just horrible. So anyway, I digress. But yeah, that's basically it. And I think I'd like to follow up with one other piece of information that people may not know. In Vermont, every abortion must be reported to the Vermont Department of Health, and they compile statistical reports that they post on their website every year about the vital statistics, and it includes marriages and deaths and births and abortions and all kinds of things. So abortions are on there, and if you go onto their website, you will see no elective 3rd trimester abortions are listed as ever happening on their website. Like, you can go back for as many years as there's data available, and you will not see that. So I just want to point out that as well, that the constitutional amendment is basically just putting into the Constitution, securing the rights and the policy reality that has been in place for 50 years in this state.
Yeah, that to me is one of the most important things for us to get across, is that these horror stories or these scared tactics about we're changing something or we're being very extreme are just absolutely not true. We are enshrining in law what was already in place with Roe v. Wade. and what have been the law of the land for decades.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Lucy, I've seen a couple of lawn signs in the area where I live. I actually live in New Hampshire, but I'm only a mile from White River. And I've seen some lawn signs and wondered where people got those. And
Some
do you
good lawn
have any?
signs?
Hmm?
Are the good lawn signs? Our opponents have lawn
Yeah,
signs too.
do they look just like some of your earlier slides?
Yeah, that's right. That's our branding. That's us.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have lawn signs, and if you you can request a lawn sign. You want to put it up in New Hampshire?
I want to be able to tell because I want to drive across the river and talk to everybody I know who lives in Vermont.
Awesome.
And I want to be able to tell them where to get literature and where to get the lawn signs. No,
Perfect.
I got enough trouble in New Hampshire without putting
I know.
that lawn sign in our front yard. But
So that is where you need to go to sign up for a lawn sign. If you can.
I'm sorry,
The
to where?
I just did a direct message to Elise. Sorry about that, Elise. I'm going to try that again. I need to direct message everyone.
Are you putting this in the chat box?
Yeah, I'm putting it in the chat. I'm putting
Okay.
I'm putting the website address in the
Oh,
chat.
okay.
And even though you're from New Hampshire and you can't pledge to vote yes on it, there is a volunteer tab. And if you go to the volunteer tab, I'm pretty sure you can sign up to be on our list, and then you can click a box to get a lawn sign. And if that doesn't work, I'm just going to put my email address in here. You can just send me an email.
Okay.
I'll make sure that our organizer who works in that area gets you a lawn sign.
And I'm assuming that there also are leaflets or something that explain.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have a lot of information on the website. And there's a toolkit. I want to direct you to a toolkit on our website that you can go to that has social media posts, a one-pager, talking points, information about how to hold an event for the amendment, and different like LTs, like different ways that you can support the effort. So if you navigate to that toolkit, and if you're having a hard time finding it, I can do it right now and to kind of help you get there.
No, I can figure it out.
Oh, it would be probably under the Take Action tab. That's my guess.
Lucy, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Because other people may have questions.
Sure. But thank you very much, Margaret, for your interest in helping out in whatever way works for you. That's wonderful. We really appreciate it. Are there other questions I might have missed in the chat? There's a great.
While we're on yard signs, Lucy, we have had anywhere from 6 to 8 have been reported to me as missing. I'm in Greensboro, Vermont, and I don't know if you're keeping a tally of that, or other than just noting that it has happened. I don't know what you do except stand in the road and say, "Stop taking my sign."
Yeah, and keep putting them up, jerks. So yeah, that's what our opponents do. They do things like this. We just we're about to figure out if we have budget to order another 1,000 signs. We've pushed out 2,000 signs all over the state, and we're still getting requests. So I think we're trying to figure out how to pay for another 1,000 signs,
Which
so
would
that
be
we can keep them going.
Which would be how much for another $1,000?
It's $6,700 and something dollars, almost, pushing $7,000 for 1,000 signs. It's a lot of
Really
money.
quickly, how old do you have to be in order to volunteer? Do you have to be a voting age?
No, we have high school students and, kids of supporters who help out in various ways. So, yeah, it's, we welcome youth into this movement for sure. This is all about the next generation, so young people are encouraged to stand with us. Thanks for asking that question.
So thank you for including them. I have a 16-year-old who is incredibly angry about all of this.
Oh,
And,
wonderful.
her friends are also incredibly angry. So if they can do something that's not just complaining in the hallway, they'll probably
Yeah.
like that.
Oh, that is such a great young life lesson to learn how to put anger into action and to do something constructive with those feelings. It is a life skill and lesson that will serve them so well for as long as they live. So I think that's wonderful to encourage that.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, then we can draw this to a close. And we want to thank you so much, Lucy, for coming and speaking to us. And as we said, the folks on this call are got a lot out of it, but it will have a life beyond this call as we post it and make sure the recording is available to our congregations all across the state.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Debbie. Thank you all for hosting me and giving me the space to talk about the amendment and the campaign. And yeah, I hope you'll all be in touch, and thank you so much for your support and engagement.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Elise. So this is great. Thanks, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.